Lane 12 was always taken by 8 a.m. The old man would sign in with just a last name, Harrison, and disappear to the far end of the range. He brought his own rifle, his own ammunition, and never spoke to anyone. The SEAL recruits training at the facility had nicknamed him the Ghost because he seemed to appear and disappear without anyone noticing. But that changed the morning when recruit Alex Chen dropped his hearing protection and crawled under the shooting bench to retrieve it. That's when he saw the old man's boots. Military issue. Still polished. And when Alex looked up, he saw something else that made his heart skip a beat. Welcome to Veteran Stories. Before we continue this powerful story of silent legends earned respect, and the moment when a young warrior discovered he'd been training alongside history itself, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe some heroes hide in plain sight, hit that subscribe button and help us honor those who were never meant to be forgotten. The San Diego Police Training Facility's shooting range opened every morning at 7 a.m. sharp, but Robert Harrison was always there by 6:45. At 67, he never said much to the range officer, just signed the clipboard with his deliberate handwriting. Last name only. No rank, no title, no small talk about the weather or politics. Just a nod, and then those same measured steps to Lane 12, the farthest position from the main building. Harrison looked like what many people expected from a regular at a gun range: weathered Levi's, a tan flannel shirt rolled to the forearms, and a brown baseball cap that had once been blue. No patches, no slogans, no indicators of anything beyond a man who valued precision and routine. His boots were worn but clean, and he carried his rifle case with a kind of steady grip that suggested decades of familiarity with firearms. The range served multiple purposes. Local police departments used it for qualification training. Private security companies conducted refresher courses. Civilian gun owners practiced recreational shooting. And for the past 6 months, a group of Navy SEAL recruits had been using the facility for advanced marksmanship training as part of their specialized qualification program. Harrison had been coming to this range for 8 years, ever since he'd moved to San Diego and needed a place to maintain skills he wasn't ready to let deteriorate. He always brought the same equipment: a custom .308 rifle in a scarred leather case, match-grade ammunition, and a thermos of black coffee that never seemed to empty. The SEAL recruits called him the Ghost, not because he was mysterious or dramatic, but because he had an unsettling ability to appear and disappear without anyone noticing when he arrived or left. One moment Lane 12 would be empty. The next Harrison would be there, methodically preparing for another session of precise shooting. The SEAL recruits had been training at the facility 3 times a week for 6 months. They were at the advanced stage of their pipeline, past Hell Week, past basic underwater demolition training, working on the specialized skills that would make them operational SEALs. Marksmanship was a critical component, and their instructor, Chief Petty Officer Sarah Martinez, demanded excellence. Today's group included Alex Chen, 24, from Seattle Analytical, precise, the type who excelled at technical challenges. Danny Torres, 26, from San Antonio, steady, reliable, with natural shooting ability that impressed even veteran instructors. Mike Sullivan, 22, from Boston, competitive, driven, always pushing to outperform his classmates. And 6 others who'd survived the brutal selection process and were now weeks away from earning their tridents. They'd been watching Harrison during their training sessions with a kind of professional interest that comes from recognizing superior performance. Harrison's shooting was consistently perfect. Not good, not impressive, perfect. His targets showed groupings that would qualify as expert level by any military standard. Guy never misses, Danny had observed during one of their breaks. Like literally never. Old school technique, Mike added. Textbook stance, breathing, follow through. Someone taught him right. Or he taught himself very, very well, Alex said, watching Harrison through binoculars as he examined his latest target. Either way, he's better than most of our instructors. Chief Martinez had noticed Harrison too, though she was more circumspect in her observations. Something about the old man's routine, his equipment maintenance, his mechanical precision, suggested training that went beyond civilian marksmanship. But Harrison kept to himself, never interfered with their training, and seemed content to pursue his own shooting goals without interaction. "He's harmless," Martinez told her recruits when they asked about Harrison. "Probably an old hunter or competition shooter. Good to have around. Shows you what consistent practice can achieve." On a Tuesday morning in October, Alex Chen was having trouble with his hearing protection. The electronic ear muffs that allowed normal conversation while blocking gunshot noise had been malfunctioning, cutting in and out unpredictably. During a reload break, Alex adjusted them incorrectly, and they slipped off his head, clattering under the shooting bench. "Damn," Alex muttered, getting down on his hands and knees to retrieve the expensive equipment. As he crawled under the bench, Alex found himself looking directly at Harrison's boots. What he saw made him pause, then look more carefully. These weren't civilian boots. These weren't hunting boots or work boots or the kind of footwear most range shooters wore. These were military-issue combat boots, polished to a mirror shine that reflected decades of military discipline. The leather was old but perfectly maintained, and Alex could see where the steel toe had been reinforced for durability. Alex's eyes traveled upward. Harrison's jeans weren't regular Levi's. They were tactical pants, faded but cut for utility and durability. His belt wasn't a civilian belt. It was a rigger's belt, the kind used by military personnel for equipment attachment and fast roping operations. And then Alex saw something that made his heart skip a beat. A tattoo on Harrison's forearm, just visible beneath the rolled-up flannel sleeve. Not a civilian tattoo, not a flag or an eagle or the kind of patriotic ink that many veterans wore. This was different. This was specific. A SEAL Trident, but not the modern version. This was old-school ink, faded by sun and time, surrounded by markings that Alex recognized from his study of SEAL history. This wasn't tattoo parlor work. This was the kind of ink that came from an era when tattoos were earned, not purchased. Alex remained motionless under the shooting bench, his mind racing. He was looking at a tattoo that told a story most people would never understand. The SEAL Trident on Harrison's arm wasn't just the basic qualification symbol. It had additional markings that indicated specialized training, deployment history, and commendations that weren't discussed in civilian company. Harrison had stopped shooting and was reloading his rifle with the kind of mechanical precision that Alex now realized came from muscle memory developed under conditions where hesitation could mean death. Alex slowly retrieved his hearing protection and emerged from under the bench. Harrison glanced at him briefly, not suspicious, not concerned, just the automatic situational awareness that combat veterans maintain throughout their lives. "Thanks," Alex said quietly, not specifying what he was thanking Harrison for. Harrison nodded once and returned to his shooting. Alex walked back to his lane with his mind spinning. He'd just discovered that the quiet old man they called the Ghost wasn't just a skilled civilian shooter. The tattoo he'd seen suggested Harrison was a SEAL, not just any SEAL, but one from the early era of Naval Special Warfare, back when the teams were smaller, more secretive, and conducted operations that never appeared in official records. Alex caught Danny Torres's attention and motioned him over during their next break. "We need to talk," Alex said quietly. "All of us." After training. That afternoon, after Chief Martinez had dismissed them and Harrison had disappeared as mysteriously as always, the SEAL recruits gathered in the parking lot to discuss what Alex had discovered. "You're sure about what you saw?" Mike Sullivan asked. "Combat boots, tactical belt, rigger pants," Alex confirmed. "And a SEAL Trident tattoo, that's definitely not modern work. This is old-school ink, probably from the 70s or early 80s. Danny whistled softly. "So the Ghost is actually a Vietnam-era SEAL," Alex finished. "Maybe earlier. That tattoo had markings I've never seen before, additional symbols that suggest specialized operations or extended combat deployment." The recruits were quiet for a moment, processing this information. They'd been training alongside a legend without knowing it. "Should we say something to him?" asked recruit Tom Bradley. "Like what?" Mike replied. "Hey, old man, we know you're a SEAL?" "The guy's been coming here for months without talking to anyone," Danny observed. "He's obviously not looking for recognition or conversation about his service." Alex nodded. But now I understand why his shooting is so perfect. Why he moves like he does. Why he seems to anticipate everything happening around him." "What do you mean?" Tom asked. "Watch him tomorrow. Really watch him. The way he positions himself with clear sight lines to all entrances. The way he's aware of everyone's location without seeming to pay attention. The way he handles his equipment like his life depends on it being perfect every time." The recruits agreed to observe Harrison more carefully, but to respect his obvious preference for privacy and anonymity. Over the following weeks, the SEAL recruits watched Harrison with new understanding. What they'd previously dismissed as the habits of a dedicated civilian shooter now revealed itself as the behavior of someone whose training had been developed under life-and-death conditions. Harrison's shooting wasn't just accurate, it was tactically sound. He fired in patterns that suggested training for combat rather than competition. His reloads were faster than most of their instructors could manage. His target analysis was brief but thorough, the kind of assessment that combat veterans made when time and ammunition were limited resources. More tellingly, Harrison's situational awareness was constant and professional. He knew when people were watching him, when new shooters arrived at the range, when range officers changed shifts. This wasn't paranoia. It was the ingrained vigilance of someone who'd survived in environments where threats could emerge without warning. "He's still operational," Alex observed quietly during one of their training sessions. "I mean, he's not active duty, but his reflexes, his awareness, his skills, they're all still sharp." Chief Martinez had been listening to their quiet discussion. "You boys figured out who the ghost is?" "We think he's a SEAL," Danny admitted. "Vietnam-era, probably." Martinez was quiet for a moment. "And what are you planning to do with that information?" "Nothing," Alex said quickly. "He's obviously not looking for recognition. It helps us understand why he's so good." Martinez nodded approvingly. "That's the right answer. If he wanted you to know his background, he'd have told you. But you can learn from watching him, even if you never speak to him about it." 3 weeks after Alex's discovery, an incident occurred that revealed more about Harrison than any conversation could have. A new shooter at the range, clearly inexperienced and possibly intoxicated, was handling his weapon unsafely. Despite warnings from range officers, the man was sweeping other shooters with his muzzle, ignoring basic safety protocols, and becoming increasingly belligerent when corrected. The situation escalated when the intoxicated shooter dropped a loaded magazine, then bent to retrieve it while pointing his rifle at other people on the line. Harrison moved before anyone else even recognized the danger. In one fluid motion, he secured his own weapon, crossed 3 lanes, and disarmed the dangerous shooter with a level of professional competence that left everyone on the range silent. The intoxicated man was on the ground, unharmed but completely immobilized, before he understood what had happened. "Range is clear," Harrison said calmly to the range officer. "Recommend police response for public intoxication and unsafe weapons handling." The range officer, a retired police sergeant, stared at Harrison with new respect. "Sir, that was professional-level response." Harrison was already walking back to lane 12, just keeping everyone safe. The SEAL recruits watched this entire incident with growing amazement. Harrison's response hadn't been emotional or aggressive. It had been tactically perfect, using exactly the amount of force necessary to neutralize a threat without causing unnecessary harm. "Chief," Mike Sullivan whispered to Martinez, "did you see that?" Martinez had seen it. She'd also recognized techniques that weren't taught in civilian courses or standard military training. Harrison's response suggested close-quarters combat training at the highest levels. After the incident with the intoxicated shooter, the dynamic between Harrison and the SEAL recruits changed subtly. They didn't approach him directly, but there was an increased level of mutual respect and awareness. Harrison began to acknowledge their presence with slight nods when they arrived for training. Nothing dramatic, just the professional recognition that warriors give each other when they understand they share common experiences. The breakthrough came when Alex Chen accidentally left his rifle cleaning kit at the range after a training session. When he returned the next morning, He found it neatly arranged at his usual shooting position, obviously cleaned and organized by someone who understood proper weapons maintenance. "Thank you," Alex said to Harrison during a break in shooting. Harrison looked up from cleaning his own rifle. "Good equipment deserves proper care." "Yes, sir. I appreciate the help." Harrison was quiet for a moment, then said, "You boys are doing good work. Your instructor knows what she's teaching." It was the longest conversation any of them had ever had with Harrison, and it opened the door for occasional brief exchanges about equipment, weather, and shooting conditions. Chief Martinez recognized that Harrison's presence at the range provided a unique learning opportunity for her recruits. Not through direct instruction. Harrison clearly wasn't interested in formal teaching, but through observation and occasional interaction. During one training session, Martinez approached Harrison directly. "Sir," she said respectfully, "I'm Chief Martinez. I train these SEAL recruits. Would you mind if they observed your shooting technique? They could learn from watching someone with your level of precision." Harrison considered this request carefully. He'd been avoiding attention for 8 years, but these weren't civilians seeking entertainment or recognition seekers looking for war stories. These were future SEALs who needed to understand what professional-level performance looked like. "They can watch," Harrison said, "but no questions about techniques or training. They need to learn by observing, not by talking." Martinez understood. "Of course, sir." Over the following sessions, the recruits watched Harrison with professional attention, learning from his consistency, his equipment handling, and his approach to precision shooting under various conditions. 6 months after Alex's initial discovery, Harrison made a decision that surprised everyone. During a break in training, he approached the group of SEAL recruits. "You boys have been respectful," he said, without preamble. "Professional. That's not common anymore." The recruits waited quietly, understanding that Harrison was deciding whether to share something he'd kept private for years. "Chief Martinez tells me you'll be graduating soon. Getting your tridents." "Yes, sir," Alex replied for the group. Harrison was quiet for a long moment, then rolled up his sleeve fully, revealing his tattoo in its entirety. The recruits could now see the full scope of what Alex had glimpsed months earlier. Not just a SEAL Trident, but additional markings that indicated extensive combat service, specialized training, and commendations that spoke to extraordinary service under extreme conditions. "SEAL Team 1, Harrison said simply. 1971 to 1995. Vietnam, Persian Gulf, other places that don't have names." The recruits stood quietly, recognizing they were in the presence of someone from the foundational era of modern naval special warfare. 24 years active duty, Harrison continued. "Retired as senior chief. Been coming here to maintain skills I'm not ready to lose." Danny Torres found his voice first. "Senior chief, it's an honor to meet you." Harrison nodded. "Honors mutual. You boys represent the future of the teams. That's important work." Harrison's decision to reveal his background changed the dynamic at the range, but not dramatically. He wasn't interested in becoming a formal instructor or sharing war stories. However, he began offering occasional guidance on technical aspects of marksmanship and equipment maintenance. "Consistency comes from routine," Harrison told the recruits during one session. "Same grip, same stance, same breathing pattern every time. When the shooting gets critical, and it will, you fall back on muscle memory." "Senior Chief," Alex asked, "what's the most important thing for new SEALs to understand about combat shooting?" Harrison was quiet while he cleaned his rifle, considering his answer. "That accuracy under stress is different from accuracy on a range," he said finally. "Range shooting teaches you fundamentals. Combat shooting teaches you to trust those fundamentals when everything in your environment is trying to make you forget them." Chief Martinez, who'd been listening to these exchanges, appreciated Harrison's practical wisdom. His guidance complemented her formal instruction perfectly, providing the kind of real-world perspective that couldn't be found in training manuals. Word of Harrison's background spread quietly through the SEAL community at Coronado, not as publicity or recognition seeking, but as a kind of professional interest that develops when current operators learn they have access to someone from the early days of naval special warfare. Harrison began receiving occasional requests to share his experience with advanced training courses, but he declined most of them. "I'm not an instructor," he told everyone who approached him. "I'm a retired SEAL who still likes to shoot. If young SEALs can learn something from watching me maintain my skills, that's fine. But I'm not looking to become anyone's teacher or mentor in any formal way." However, his influence on the recruits who trained alongside him was significant. They learned from his example that professional skills required constant maintenance, that excellence was a daily chitsa rather than a destination, and that true competence was quiet, consistent, and humble. When Alex Chen's class graduated from SEAL training and received their tridents, Harrison was there. Not at the ceremony. He avoided official events, but at the range the following morning, where he'd laid out a small display of vintage SEAL memorabilia as an unofficial recognition of their achievement. "Senior Chief," Alex said, "we wanted to thank you for what you've taught us." "Didn't teach you anything," Harrison replied. "You learned by watching and doing. That's how it's supposed to work." Danny Torres stepped forward and handed Harrison a small package. "This is from all of us." Inside was a custom challenge coin, not official issue, but something the new SEALs had commissioned from a local craftsman. One side bore the modern SEAL Trident. The other side had an inscription, "Lane 12, the Ghost, Quiet Professional." Harrison turned the coin over in his weathered hands, studying the inscription. "You boys didn't need to do this." "Yes, sir, we did," Mike Sullivan said. "Because what you showed us about maintaining standards and staying ready, even in retirement, that's something we'll carry with us for the rest of our careers." Harrison pocketed the coin and returned to setting up his shooting position. "Just remember that the trident you earned is the same one I earned. The standards don't change. The mission doesn't change. Only the faces change." Harrison continued his routine at the range, maintaining the same schedule he'd kept for 8 years. Now occasionally, newly graduated SEALs would request permission to train alongside him, treating the experience as an informal master class in professional standards and long-term skill maintenance. Harrison tolerated these requests, but insisted on maintaining his privacy and routine. He wasn't interested in becoming a celebrity or a symbol, just a retired SEAL who wanted to maintain his skills while providing an example of what sustained excellence looked like. "The most important thing you can do," Harrison told a group of young SEALs during one of these informal sessions, "is remember that being a SEAL isn't something you were. It's something you are. The responsibility doesn't end when you retire." 2 years after revealing his identity to Alex Chen's class, Harrison was still at Lane 12 every Tuesday and Thursday morning. Now 69, his shooting remained as precise as ever, his routine as disciplined, his presence as professionally quiet. New classes of SEAL recruits trained at the facility, most of them learning about the Ghost from their predecessors rather than from Harrison himself. He preferred it that way, being known by reputation rather than by self-promotion. Chief Martinez, who'd been promoted and transferred to new duties, stopped by the range during a visit to San Diego. "Senior Chief," she said, finding Harrison at his usual position. "How are you doing?" "Same as always, Chief. Maintaining standards." Martinez watched Harrison's target through binoculars, still perfect after all these years. "The recruits still talk about training alongside you. They say it taught them more about being a professional than months of formal instruction." Harrison reloaded his rifle before responding. "They learned what they were ready to learn. I just gave them an example of what maintaining standards looks like over time." "Is that what you'd want your legacy to be? Teaching young SEALs about sustained excellence?" Harrison looked down the range at his target, then at Martinez. "Chief, I don't think about legacy. I think about today's shooting session. If tomorrow's SEALs can learn something from watching someone maintain professional standards past retirement, that's fine. But my job is to keep my own skills sharp, not to teach other people theirs." Harrison's story became part of the informal tradition at the San Diego facility. New SEAL recruits learned about the quiet old man at Lane 12 who'd served in the early days of Naval Special Warfare and now demonstrated what lifelong commitment to excellence looked like. He never gave speeches, never wrote memoirs, never sought recognition for his service or his influence on younger SEALs. He simply showed up, shot with mechanical precision, and embodied the quiet professionalism that defined the best of naval special warfare. Harrison's final lesson to the SEALs who observed him was perhaps his most important. That being a warrior isn't about seeking glory or recognition, but about maintaining standards that serve something larger than yourself, even when no one is watching and no one is counting. At 69, he still arrived at Lane 12 before 8 a.m., still shot with the precision that had impressed SEAL recruits for years, and still left without fanfare or conversation beyond what was necessary. The ghost remained a ghost, but now the younger generation of SEALs understood that some spirits were worth following. Robert Harrison never intended to become a mentor or a symbol. He'd come to Lane 12 seeking the solitude and routine that allowed him to maintain skills he'd spent 24 years developing as a SEAL. When Alex Chen accidentally discovered Harrison's true identity, it revealed something extraordinary: that the highest levels of military professionalism could be maintained decades after retirement, and that true excellence was demonstrated through daily choices rather than dramatic gestures. Harrison's influence on the SEAL recruits who trained alongside him wasn't through instruction or storytelling, but through example. He showed them what sustained commitment looked like, what professional standards meant over a lifetime, and why the warrior ethos was a permanent identity rather than a temporary assignment. His story reminds us that the most valuable teachers are often those who don't seek to teach, that the most important lessons are learned through observation rather than lecture, and that true professionals maintain their standards not for recognition, but because standards matter. So now I ask you, have you ever encountered someone whose quiet competence revealed depths of experience and dedication you never suspected? Someone whose daily routine reflected a lifetime of professional excellence? Share their story in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from. Because at Veteran Stories, we believe that the greatest professionals are often the ones we barely notice, quietly maintaining standards that serve as examples for anyone wise enough to pay attention. Subscribe if stories like this matter to you. Because every community has people like Senior Chief Harrison, warriors who never stopped being warriors, even when the world stopped watching.